yesterday, Donald Trump enacted a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, responded with a 25% tariff against U.S. goods. Already, several provinces in Canada, including Quebec, where I'm living, have announced that we're cutting off all American beers, wines, liquors. Like, production has stopped. The U.S. national anthem has been booed at hockey games. My friends, this is about as enraged as you can get a relatively chill and peaceful country like Canada. So, to any Americans who are watching, I just want to explain a bit about why this moment has been perceived so poorly from Canadians. And then in the second part of the video, which I hope you all stick around for, because in many ways this is what I want to communicate today. In the second part of this video, I'm going to talk about why I think Americans should be more worried than Canadians right now. And it's not purely about economics. It's a much bigger concern that you guys are facing, which, we'll get to that soon. But first of all, a lot of Americans I talk to don't really know much about Canada. Maybe they took a trip to Montreal when they were young. Maybe they went to the Rocky Mountains. If they live close to the border, they probably know that we're actually, in many ways, very similar. We are sharing a North American identity, and perhaps culturally we're as close as two countries can be. Imagine the U.S. is like the older brother, right? The U.S. is like a 15-year-old, and then Canada is like an 11-year-old, right? And the 15-year-old keeps saying, "Oh, like I'm gonna steal your room and kick you outside one day. I need another room for my computer. And the younger brother's just like, okay, really funny, like brothers are always arguing, right? But you think it's done from a place of love and some kind of sincere, like there's a sincere underpinning to the relationship because you're brothers, because you've always been together. You've always shared a family. That's how it's felt being a Canadian next to the U.S. We've always been brothers. And so jokes like that don't really matter. But when it's a joke followed up by a tariff, like this is basically like the U.S. just smacked the younger brother across the head and said, I'm going to keep smacking you every single day until you clean up your border, which is the supposed reasoning for this, that we have too many drugs flowing across the U.S. border. Despite the fact that if you look at the statistics, less than 1% of the fentanyl in the U.S. actually comes from Canada. And despite the fact that if you look at violent crime in Canada, all of the rise in shootings in cities like Toronto and Montreal, where do you think those guns are coming from, other than the United States? I mean, you guys manufacture the weapons that cause harm on Canadian streets. So who actually has the right to be upset here? Leaving aside that, because I don't want to get too sidetracked with pointing out the hypocrisy of the actual order that was made, the fact is, if you've been to a Canadian grocery store, you know that, 50% of products are made in the United States. Maybe a bit higher or lower, depending where you shop. We have Canadian supermarkets, obviously, that have more Canadian products. But we also have Walmart. We also have, everything. If you just look around, like all of the big, McDonald's and Starbucks, they're all there. We are very much an Americanized society because we saw ourselves as brothers, in a sense. And I think that relationship has very quickly changed. I think Trump joking about Canada's sovereignty will no longer be seen the same. I think Americans traveling to Canada will no longer be seen the same, unfortunately. And there will be Americans who say, listen, angry Canadians, like upset Canadians, don't be disappointed at me, I didn't vote for the guy. That's what some people will say. We're suffering under Trump as well. And that's true. I certainly don't I don't think every citizen is responsible for the government entirely. But if you step outside of the American example and just think about, if the Chinese government were to fire a missile off the coast of Florida, right? Would that not create a wave of anger against China in the abstract? Because, the Chinese government isn't in front of you. You can't just get angry at the Chinese government, right? But it creates a wave of anger or distrust towards the culture that has done that action, the culture that has elected the person who has done that action. And I think, it's very important for us to be aware of that and not to give in to needless hate. I mean, I certainly don't hate all Americans in this moment. I have a lot of friends who are Americans. But I will have a lot less patience for people who are making jokes about Canada or talking trash about Canada, because we have been dragged into a trade war. But, the second word after trade is war. Like, we've been dragged into a state of heightened alertness, which none of us wanted, none of us asked for. It's been forced upon us. Just like it's been forced upon the people of Mexico, the people of Greenland. Imagine being on this frozen island. I mean, you think Canada's cold. Imagine being in this frozen island next to the Arctic. There's like 50,000 people living there, and the U.S. is threatening to take it over by force. And when Trump talks to Denmark, who controls Greenland, he makes it clear he's not joking, right? How do you think Europe feels when that is the big story over there? How do you think Central America feels when Trump wants to take Panama? Like, this is the situation that I think, as we begin to shift from the Canadian perspective to the American perspective, this is the situation that I think Americans really need to be concerned about. How can I put it? There's different opinions on who Trump is and what he wants to do and what this whole current government is up to. But when you look at the specific actions, like when you try and clear your mind of what Trump's speeches or the election or how many people, like, forget about everything and just like pretend you're an outsider and look at the actions. So across the country, they're rounding up, ethnic minorities. I mean, in this case, mostly Latinos, it seems like, putting them on airplanes back to their countries. I'm not a liberal snowflake who thinks that anyone should be allowed to illegally enter any country and stay forever, right? Like, I don't necessarily think it's bad to enforce border policy. However, you're already creating an atmosphere of ethno-nationalism, I would say. Like, we are the proper people to be here. Everyone else, you need to show me the papers, and I need to see that you are legal to be here, and I need to look at you, and what is it about the diversity, equity, inclusion? It's like, oh, so your skin's a bit too dark. I don't think you should be the pilot of that airplane. Or, oh, you're a woman. Should you really be taking this high job in the FBI? Like, that is kind of the undercurrent of sentiment that we have here. The dog whistles that we're hearing over and over and over. Everyone is the enemy. Internally, everyone is the enemy in the sense of, if you don't believe what Trump and his team want you to believe. But now, what's really catching my attention is this same mentality is moving external. So, places like Canada, who have nothing but a history of peace and prosperity next to the United States for over 100 years. Like, we have the longest peaceful border in the world, actually, the Canada-US border. I've crossed it many, many times. Before September 11th, 2001, you actually didn't need a passport to cross the US border. That was how open it was. You could just drive across. Those days are over and unfortunately not coming back. But now we seem to be entering another level of we can't come back from this moment, which is the idea of us even being friends, allies, peaceful neighbors is up for question. So for Canadians, it's dark days, but we're a tough country. We're going to rally around each other. Hopefully we will use this as an excuse to start building more things in Canada. It's possible that this will actually inspire Canadians to, manufacture our own cars, our own products, like our own high-tech, our own manufacturers. But all of this will take many years to build the infrastructure for. But if there's ever been a reason not to rely so heavily on the United States, this is it. And I think it will be a defining moment in the consciousness of our country once the initial shock and anger and disappointment has cleared. I think that the tariffs is just another act of Donald Trump. It's not even financial. It's a little bit financial because he's a business guy. There's a little bit of trying to promote I'm making people buy American. Look at me, I'm doing the right thing. But the real thing Trump is doing here is just consolidating power and creating an atmosphere of fear where no one is your friend, and it's Americans against the world. It's Americans against each other. It's us against you. And that's fascism, my friends.